You're listening to the Intellectual Investor Podcast, special episode, 2025 IMA Annual Client Meeting. To listen to more episodes, visit investor.fm. Once a year, my company, IMA, hosts a dinner for our clients. Most of them live outside of Denver and many outside the U.S. So this event gives us a rare and meaningful chance to meet face-to-face, often for the first time, and really get to know each other. A few years ago, we started recording these evenings so clients who couldn't attend could still be part of the experience. Today, I'm excited to share the recording from our March 2025 dinner. You can also explore past events in a link in the show notes. This video begins with opening remarks, followed by a Q&A covering topics like the U.S. dollar's role as the global reserve currency interest rate cuts and IMA's succession planning. We also touch on tariffs' effects on U.S. manufacturing jobs, stock selling decisions, IMA's use of AI, hedging against an S&P 500 decline, quantum computing's future, and why I've never shorted a stock.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm delighted to see all of you. We have our clients, our friends, our family. And I gotta tell you, my family are my clients as well, and they could be the worst clients. I'll give you an example. My wife Rachel, right there. When we when we got married in 2000, we went. She told me to buy Costco. At the time it was $40, $50 stock, and I didn't. Today it's $900. And every single time we go to Costco, she reminds me of that. So that's kind of what happens when you have a wife as a client. All right. Well, on a serious note, I'm really humbled that all of you came here, and I'm humbled about the trust the clients gave us, because for a lot of you, we manage your life savings, and that's a big deal. We really take it very seriously, and our slogan is, "We grow your wealth. You don't worry about the markets." Or to put it another way, we try to kind of minimize volatility of your blood pressure, and sometimes we do okay with that. There's Ed Callahan sitting right here. And Ed was talking to one of his friends, and Ed was asked, "Who's managing your money?" And Ed said, "My money is managed by paranoid Russian Jew." And so there's a healthy amount of paranoia at IMA, let me put it this way. Let me tell you our agenda for tonight. So for the next 30, 40 minutes, I'll talk about topics that you guys want me to talk about. I'm going to talk about defense. I'm going to talk about global affairs. I'm going to talk about tariffs. Then we're going to take a 15 minutes break, and then we'll be doing Q&A for as long as you want me to do it. So I'll be here. Okay, but first, let me introduce my wonderful, wonderful IMA team. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to ask you to stand up first so I can name you, and then I'll talk about each one of you. So if you look right there, we have Cyrus, right there. Then right next to them, we got Robert. And then right next to him, we got Barbara. Okay, all right. So I'm gonna start with Cyrus. So for Cyrus, this was a big year for many reasons. Number one, he was promoted to Director of Operations. Our wonderful Lisa Martin semi-retired, and today she provides basically adult supervision for the most part. Also, Cyrus is a semi-professional cyclist, and he's a 2-time national college champion. That's the only way I can say it, Cyrus. I'm sorry. Okay, he just came from Brazil for a 5-day bicycle race. And I tell you, if you're a client, you cannot have a better person in operations. He truly, truly cares about you. He does an incredible job. I cannot think of a better person running our operations. And also, this year, it's a big year for Cyrus because he just engaged, and he's going to get married to Emily, who's sitting right next to him on May 25th. So mazel tov to both of you guys. All right, and so that's Cyrus. Right next to him, we got Robert, and Robert is our newest team member. He joined us in October, and let me tell you this. Microsoft, IBM, and Amazon are trying to invent a quantum computer. And we got them beat. We got Robert. Okay? And if you don't trust me, just spend 10 minutes talking to him, and you'll see what I mean. And when Cyrus and I interviewed Robert in October, 20 minutes into the interview, both of us knew that we're going to hire him. That was one of the easiest decisions we made, hiring for this position. So, Robert just had a baby. By the way, this is, Robert and his wife had a baby, or his wife had a baby, whatever, she had a baby, all right. But Robert wanted to make sure that the baby is born before December 31st. For obvious reasons. So, and she was born on December 31st. Anyway, okay, so that's Robert. Right next to Robert, we have Barbara. And Barbara, believe it or not, came all the way from Buenos Aires. Barbara has been with IMA for 8 years, since 2017. And she's kind of our team's mascot. She has this incredible positive energy. And I gotta tell you, I'm so lucky to have these guys. And you guys can sit down now. I don't have to, I'm not gonna torture you. Now, we also have team members who are not here. So our analyst, Max, he actually lives in Kiev. And he's been with us for 3 years. He's just like me, he's a CFA, and he joined the company a year after the war started. And I gotta tell you, I'm so lucky to have him because he's an incredible analyst, and he made me a better investor. Max is obsessed about corporate management. I never seen anybody been obsessed about it. He really put it into in analyzing management into a process. And this has been he helped us to improve our process tremendously. So we got analyst Max. In addition to this, we have other team members. We got Stanley, who is in charge of marketing. He's in New York. We got Dragan, who is in charge of our technology. He is in Serbia. We have Nadia, who helps us to become more efficient technologically. She's in Bulgaria. We got Cameron, who we just literally recently hired, and he's helping us to introduce AI to our research. And I think I'm missing somebody. Oh, and we have Pavel. Pavel was the one who made all these wonderful posters. Pavel is in Ukraine. So when I say that kind of Denver is our global headquarters, you can see that we are kind of a truly global company in our own weird way. But yes, all right. So, okay, so I am very, very lucky because I have 2 wonderful families. I have a family, and I got my wife here, right there, Rachel right there. I got my daughter Mia Sarah there. There is my son Jonah right there, and there is my daughter Hannah somewhere here as well. I can't see her though. Right there. So I got my wonderful family, and I also have an incredible work family. And I'm happy to go to work, and I'm happy to go home. So people ask me if I ever going to retire or if I ever going to become a full-time writer. And I tell them, retire from what? I'm already retired. In the sense that I have a perfect life. I truly do, because I do what I love, and I work with wonderful people. And in my next life, I want to be me, okay, with more hair. But that's basically it. And by the way, I did the math today. If you look at top 20 stocks, and if you count how many people work for these companies, that there are 718,000 people wake up every day to make sure that your portfolio goes up a little bit every day, because they go to work, these companies become a little bit more profitable, and your portfolio appreciates over time. So I don't have to work as hard because there's a lot of people out there who work for the companies we own, and they make us more money. So I'm very lucky with that as well. Okay. So let me talk a little bit about this year versus last year. So in the January this year, I wrote you a letter basically saying, last year was a crazy year. Our portfolio did objectively well. It went up, and but it did not go up as nearly as much as the market did, because last year the market was very crazy. The 7 companies, the fantastic, terrific, wonderful 7 companies, basically drove the performance of the market. What's truly interesting is that the same portfolio that kind of was not as exciting last year is up double digits this year. Same stocks that were kind of doing all right last year, up tremendously this year, and nothing changed. And this is actually a very good lesson about investing, that you make investment decisions and you have no idea when the market is going to reward you. And another point I wanted to make is that when we take what we do very seriously, every single company we buy, we spend probably at least 100 hours doing research. Every single company, we talk to management. I meet with some of the management. So like we went to Switzerland this year. We spent time with CEO and CFO International Petroleum. In 2 weeks, I'm going to Washington, D.C. We're going to meet a few companies, and then we're going to go, is actually Robert and Cyrus are going to join me, and we're going to visit, we're going to go to Norfolk, and we're going to spend time, we're going to go to shipyards of Huntington Ingalls that make submarines. Last year, in January, February, I went to England to visit Babcock, which is our largest holding, and we got to visit their shipyards, and they also make submarines. They fix submarines for British Navy. So your portfolio has a few dozen carefully selected stocks. Not every one of them was going to work out, and you know that because not everyone did. But I think we are making. Cyrus told me not to use the word bets because it's going to make me sound like we're gambling. But it is. We are basically making, well-researched bets on high quality. We want to buy high quality companies that are undervalued. Not all going to work out, but overall it should. That's kind of the only thing I can promise is that we're going to try very hard. And another thing I want to make a point about is that a lot of people say the market is very expensive. And I'll tell you, the market is incredibly expensive. In fact, if you look at S&P 500, today the market is basically the most expensive it has been over the last 100 years, or close to it, somewhere there. But then I tell you, we don't own the market, and we really don't. So I was talking to a true story. I was talking to a good friend of mine who's been managing money for 40 years. And we were just talking stocks, and I was going through my portfolio. And he said, Vitaliy, I don't think I know 70% of the companies you mentioned. Because the companies if you open your portfolio, you see these weird companies in Britain, in Japan, in Germany, whatever. And most of these companies are not in the S&P 500. So our portfolio is very different from the market. And I think that's the important point to understand, because we don't own the market. Okay, now I got to give you a disclaimer. Okay, I want you to have some empathy for me, and I'll explain you why. The topic I'm going to talk about is going to be about economy, geopolitics, and we live in a very politically charged world. There's a team Democrats, team Republicans. If I say if you don't like what I say about if you like what I say about the current government, or you don't like about it, some people throw, if you don't like, you're gonna throw. If I say something good, some people will throw broccoli at me. If I say something bad, throw a steak at me. The point I want to make is this. This is not, what I'm about to talk about, it's not a political speech. I'm here let me give you this analogy. Let's say I'm a Broncos fan, and Broncos about to play Chicago Bears, okay? And I have a lot of money riding on this game. My affinity to Broncos is irrelevant. My job is to try to figure out which team is going to win. Because guess what? In 3 hours, as Seneca says, time discovers truth. So my job is to analyze, okay? And therefore, what I'm going to say today has absolutely no political connotations to it. In fact, I would argue I have a huge advantage almost all of you, because I wasn't born in this country, okay? And here's my advantage. I was brainwashed about communism, okay? I was not brainwashed about Team Democrat or Team Republican, okay? Failure of communism kind of killed that part of brainwashing. But my point is, over the last 4 elections, I voted for Democrat, Republican, Independent, and on one election, I voted my daughter, Mia Sarah, okay? Not necessarily in this order. My point is, I have a flexible mind, okay? So this is not a political speech. But I'm gonna be, what may sound critical or congratulatory of our president, none of this political. Okay, now that's aside, let's talk about our defense portfolio. So just for one tricky part about it, some of you guys are new clients, some of you are old clients, and all your portfolios are different. But for people who've been with us for a while, you know that maybe 30 to 35% of your portfolio today is in defense companies. Most of it are European defense companies. So let me talk about what we think about the world and what we think about defense. So let's start with NATO. So NATO was started in 1949 after World War II. And the alliance was basically between Europe and the United States. And the alliance was basically said, if we're going to get together. If somebody attacks one of our countries, we're going to respond back together. And that was the whole idea behind it. But over the years, there was a significant disparity in spending between the United States and Europe. United States always spent a lot more than Europe. Now, the United States had a competitive advantage because we had a reserve currency. United States has the largest economy in the world. We have the most stable political government. We have the biggest economy. And having a strong military basically ensured that US dollar is going to be the reserve currency. Therefore, when we spend more on military, we actually got a return on that. Because reserve currency basically means that you had a lot of inflows into our bonds, which kept interest rates lower. So therefore, we could spend more money and our interest rates would not go up as much. Okay? So therefore, we had incentives to actually have stronger military. Now, Europe always spent a lot less on defense. Now, some countries had the same reasons, some had different. So the largest country in Europe is Germany. And Germany spent less money for 2 reasons. Number one, they looked at defense spending the same way a drunk looks at beer. They wanted to stay away from it, okay? Because for obvious reasons, because they did start 2 world wars, the last 100 years. Also, if you look at other countries, they basically, and Cyrus told me by saying this, I'm going to offend a lot of European clients. But let's be honest, Europe is a lot more socialized. And with socialism, you have a lot more regulation. You have a slower growth. You have very strict labor laws. And if you look over the last 30 or 40 years, we had very peaceful 30 or 40 years. And basically, Europe realized that instead of spending money on defense, they might as well spend this money on social services. And also, European economy, Europe, there is a saying that America, does a great job with innovation. China has turned manufacturing into science. And Europe basically perfected regulation. I mean, they're incredibly good at regulating things, And if you look at Europe, there's very little innovation in Europe. I challenge you to name one significant startup that came out of Europe for the last 20 years. I can name one, Spotify. That's exactly right. That's how easy it was, right, Ed? That's how easy it was to name because there are so few of them. Because what happens when usually, if you have a great idea in Europe, you don't open this company in Europe, you come to the United States. But that tells you, about Europe. So to spend more money on defense, you have to basically, either borrow money or you have to basically cut social programs. And Europe did not feel compelled to do this because why? It seems like the world becoming more peaceful, and there's this friend, United States, will protect it. Then Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. I watched an interview with Dmytro Kuleba. Dmytro was, until about 6 months ago, he was Ukraine's foreign minister. And he said something that was fascinating to me. He said, when when the war started, my job was basically to negotiate with other countries to get weapons for Ukraine. And to my shock, when I was talking to, when I talked to our European friends, I realized that they have no weapons. And what I mean by this, he said, they have enough weapons to showcase them in all these military exhibits, but they had absolutely no weapons in the warehouse, none. And this is very important. There's a side note to this. Whenever Putin tells you that he invaded Ukraine because he was afraid of NATO, just want you to realize German army did not have enough rifles and bullets for for its whole army. By the way, it shrunk by half. Like, I would argue that probably Denver Police Department could invade Europe. That's how little weapons it had. So the war in Ukraine happens, and then European countries start to increase their spending on defense, and I think it went up by 30%. So if by NATO charter they were supposed to spend 2% of their GDP. Before the war, average country in Europe spent about maybe 1.4. Since then, that spending went to 1.9. Okay, but I want you to think about it. So, Russia, the unimaginable war has happened. These countries for 25 years spent a minuscule amount of money on defense, and their defense spending only went up to 2%. I want you to think about it for a second, because if you think about it, if the law of averages works like this: if you were below average, to bring to average, first you have to go above average. In other words, first you have to, if Europe wanted to have enough weapons to fight Russia, they probably need to spend 3 or 4 or 5% of their GDP on defense, but they didn't. And then, what happened was this. We have a new president, and this president looks at our problems. We have $36 trillion of debt. We have a direct enemy that's strong enemy, China. China is a very different enemy than, it's a very formidable enemy because we took our industrial base from the United States and shipped it to China. Today, Chinese shipbuilding is 200 times larger than it is in the United States. I want you to think about it. We have almost no shipbuilding in the United States, okay? So Trump realizes, when Trump was the president the first time, he complained to Europeans that they don't spend enough money on defense. By the way, I don't want to pick on Trump because, as I understand, every single president since Nixon told Europeans that they don't spend enough money on defense. Okay, and then also he looks at Russia and he basically thinks that this is a, you may agree or disagree with that, but there are two oceans between us. It's really European problem. And these guys are basically kind of free riding on the United States. And so then a couple of things happened. So he basically, you guys remember this, he basically implied a couple of times that we may or may not protect Europe. Then there was a horrendous press conference with Zelensky, where basically he showed that Trump is very transactional, and I'll talk about this more. And what's the interesting part about it, the press conference was on Friday. On Monday, our portfolio went up 4% in one day, and the market was down 1%. This is, that's because, because this is on that weekend, Europe woke up and realized, oh my God, we have no weapons. There's a mad guy in Russia, and we thought we had a protection from the United States, and we may or may not have one. Okay. So the good thing about this is a problem that Europe can solve. Let me explain you why. The size of European economy is about, 19, 20 trillion dollars. Population of Europe is about 400 million people. Population of Russia is 140 million people, and the size of Russian economy is 2 trillion. So European economy is 9 or 10 times larger than Russia's. It has a lot more people. What has to happen, and I think we already see this happening, Germany, Germany is a different country today than it was 3 weeks ago. Like 3 weeks ago, only 10% of German population, or maybe a few months ago, only 10% of German population supported increased debt and increased spending on defense. Today, 72% of the population supports that. Germany, they just working on changing constitution, which is a big deal, where spending on defense is not going to count against their budget deficits. They just raised $800 billion fund. Some of it is going to go on infrastructure because it's aging. Some of it is going to go on, big part of it is going to go on defense. Germany's spending on defense is going to go from 1.9% to 3.5%, and probably larger than that over time. Germany has very little debt, so they can afford that. Other countries in Europe, it's going to be more difficult for them. But I got to tell you, if I was French, I probably would not want Russian tanks to be running to Paris, because then they would have to learn Russian. And I got to tell you, I know that language, and it's a very difficult language. So they don't want to learn it, okay? So Europe will be spending more money on defense, okay? And now they're going to have to, they're probably going to, the first thing is going to go is the foreign aid, and that's exactly what UK did. United Kingdom said we're going to increase our spending from 2.2% to 2.5% by killing our foreign aid. The next thing is going to go is social programs. And by the way, I spent a lot of time looking at of how much they spend on social programs. I'll give you an example. The United States spends 8% of our GDP on kind of social/protection programs. I don't know if Medicaid is part of it, but it's only 8%. In France and other countries, that number is 20 or 25. So so if they want to find 1 or 2% of GDP, they can find it. Okay. Let me see. Also, the Abraham Maslow, who was an American psychologist, he said that when he talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, he basically said that food, water, and safety are our fundamental needs. If you're missing any one of those, nothing else matters, okay? Europe today does not feel safe, And that point is very, very important. Europe does not feel safe. Okay. Okay, let me see. All right. Nobody knows how much money they're going to spend on defense. I played with the numbers. Is that over the next 5 years, European countries most likely going to spend $1.4 trillion on defense, on the defense spending. And when I say this, I'm not talking about defense, I'm talking about weapons, just weapons. And I'll talk about what the difference is in a second. That's 130% more than they spent over the previous 5 years. So it's more than double. It's a double plus 30%. Okay? So the defense spending in Europe is going to go up a lot. But I feel like we have a few insights into this. Okay? And I think our first insight is this. The spending on weapons is going to go up. So I remember I told you the German spending is going to go from 1.9% of GDP to 3.5. But what's interesting is the amount of money they spend on weapons is going to go up at a faster rate. Why? Let me give you a very interesting number. In 2010, United States spent roughly $750 billion in defense. Out of that $750 billion, $250 went on weapons. It's about a third. And that's very typical. That's about a third going on weapons is very typical. The rest goes to personnel, pensions, and other things. The same year, Germany spent $45 billion in defense, but only $6 billion of that went on weapons. So 45, 6. So like 15% or less. But this way gets interesting. So Germany is 4 times smaller than the United States. So if you normalize for that, so just multiply by 4. So in other words, in 2010, when we spent $250 billion, they spent, adjusting for the size, 25. We spent 10 times more. So Germany has to spend a lot of money to actually have an army, to create an army. They have soldiers. They have bows and arrows. I don't know what they have, but they don't have weapons. So they're going to have weapons. So we look at our defense portfolio, and we look at a lot of these companies, and they may look expensive, but then you have to realize they look expensive on 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I mean, only the world that existed 3 weeks ago. The world that exists forward is going to be a very different world. And I think, so that's point number 1. Point number 2, and this, what I'm about to tell you is shocking. And you're not going to believe me, and I hope you Google it, and you'll see this is absolutely true. So the amount of money Europe is going to spend on European weapons versus American weapons is going to be very different. Let me tell you a little story, and this is the story that's shocking. So United Kingdom, our closest ally, has nuclear submarines. And we know this because Babcock services them, and BAE is another company we own, makes them. But United Kingdom actually does not own their nuclear weapons. Trident nuclear weapons were developed together with the United States. And they are on lease with the United States. So you're puzzled, and I was puzzled as well, exactly. So they own about 120, they lease 120 Trident nuclear weapons. 20, a third of them are deployed on submarines all over the world. And about, 80 or 70 are stored in a Kings Bay in Georgia. And what the shocking part is this. England today is talking to France to asking them for secondary defense, nuclear defense, if United States takes those nuclear weapons back. Can you imagine how paranoid you have to be, how little trust you have towards the United States for you to think that? And this is a real deal. Okay, so if I was a European country, the next dollar I spend, I would not give it to the United States. because, and I'll give you a couple examples. 2 weeks ago, Trump basically stopped providing intelligence to Ukraine. Ukraine also has F-16s that they got not from the United States, but from some other countries. And what Trump did, he stopped, and this is, I'm a money manager, I'm not a military expert, but he basically stopped providing software support for those jets. So the software they had, the GEMS, the anti-radar software they had stopped working. So those planes became naked, okay? So now it gets interesting. The best plane you can buy today is F-35 that's made by Lockheed Martin. And that plane has a lot of software. I read so many articles on the subject. If the United States stop providing software, that plane becomes blind. But it gets worse than that, because also the United States provides parts to those planes, okay? And those planes burn through a lot of parts. So if the United States decides not to provide parts, then guess what? You have a very expensive $100 million brick sitting on your runway. So when I realized that we sold Lockheed Martin, so we owned a little bit of it, we sold it. 2 days later, I read an article that Portugal was thinking about buying F-35s, and they decided not to buy them. Switzerland is doing the same thing. So in European countries, basically, that money is going to be diverted from American companies to European companies. So in other words, why does it matter? Because if you look from an investment perspective, if that, about 20% of European defense spending used to go to American companies. Today, most of it is going to go to the companies we own. So that's why I think the tailwind behind them is actually stronger than you would think. And I think that's all I have to tell you about defense. So I can, so this is the first part. Okay, the second part, we got a lot of emails asking me what's going to happen to US dollar. And so I'm going to talk about this, and then we're going to go into Q&A. So I already talked a little bit about US dollar, but I would argue today I'm going to make an argument that it's most likely going to decline. And it already has declined, but it's going to continue to decline. And here's why. So we have $36 trillion of debt, and our interest today is larger than, it's basically we spend more money on interest payments on our debt than we spend on defense. Also, we issued a lot of bonds when interest rates were almost zero, like 4 or 5 years ago, and a lot of those bonds are going to mature, and when we roll them over, then we're going to start paying 4 or 5% instead of 0. So interest expense is going to go up more. Today we basically have the economy is doing. We're not in recession, but even though we're not in recession, we're still running 6 or 7% budget deficits. Usually you run 6 or 7% budget deficits when you're in a recession. In a normal economy, you don't do this. So our economy is not very healthy. In addition to this, and by the way, I wrote this article about Bitcoin, been very critical of then candidate Trump. And he followed through with his promise, and he created a Bitcoin reserve. And this is not a political statement, but this is the most idiotic decision I've seen by any sitting president. It's not a political statement. And it's very simple. We are given a gift of a reserve currency, okay? People basically said, we don't have better alternative, therefore, when we have extra money, we're not going to keep it in euro, on pesos, we're going to put it in the US dollar. When US government comes out and basically endorses the only alternative that's out there, we just endorse in our own competition, which I think it is an idiotic decision. It's not a political statement, it's economics 101. Any thinking person would come to this conclusion. So that's another reason why US dollar are going to get weaker. But the reason actually I want to talk about is actually has nothing to do with anything I just talked about. It has to do with soft power. So United States is, we consider ourselves we are an exceptional nation. And I'm not, and what does exceptional means? That we are special, that there's something different about us, the way we behave is different. And that in itself shows up in our soft power, because we have a lot of friends. And when we have to confront enemies, we get together with our friends and we are stronger. And that's our soft power. Now, when our president self-admittedly becomes transactional president, okay, that's his words, not mine, then that changes things tremendously. And let me give you this, I'm gonna give you this framework, and I want you to think about this. Let's say you have two systems. You have a kind of transactional one-shot system, and then you have another system that's a trust-based system. And I'll explain this in a second a little bit more. And and then each system has two types of capital. You have financial capital, and you have reputational capital. When you're in a one-shot transactional system, let me give an example of what it would look like. Let's say you're selling your house. You live in this house. You're going to sell this house, and the next house you're going to buy is going to be 30 years from now. Okay? So in this system, all the incentives for you to be focused on financial capital and spend very little time thinking about reputational capital. Okay? There's a legal issues with it, how much you have to disclose. There's morality issues. But basically, putting this aside, your incentives are to disclose as little as possible about your house, as little as possible about your problems. Now, I have a rabbi sitting here, so he can tell me about all the morality stuff that comes with that. But I'm putting this aside. You're going to be really spending most of your time thinking about how much money you're going to make, and you're going to spend very little time thinking about your reputation. Because here's the thing. The next transaction you're going to have is going to be in 20, 30 years. And the chances that the same person who bought this house will be buying your house 20 years from now, practically zero. Now, let me give you another example. Let's say you're a small home builder in a small town. Okay? There you have suppliers, you have employees, and you have customers. Now, at this point, your reputational capital becomes as important as your financial capital. Because if you screw your suppliers, if you don't pay them on time, they're not going to give you credit. If you mistreat your employees, you're going to have nobody to work in for you. And if you sell faulty houses or if you don't honor your warranty, you're going to have a hard time selling future houses. That's where reputational capital comes in. So in a trust-based system, kind of where it's kind of infinite long-term game, you have both capitals are important. Trust capital, the financial capital is important, and reputational capital is important. In that system, in every transaction, in any transaction, you could lose money, but you can't lose reputation. Because the thing about reputation, it takes, and by the way, everything I tell you doesn't just apply to, I have my son sitting there, and that's a lesson for him as much, or my daughters, as much as about its economics. But it takes a whole life to build a reputation, and you can lose it like this. So there is an interesting asymmetry exists with when it comes to reputation, reputational capital, because your upside, your downside is much greater than your upside. Okay. So now I want you to think about this. Oh, and one more thing. In the reputational capital, in a trust system, if you are losing money on every single transaction financially, but you are accumulating a huge amount of goodwill, maybe you should not be in that business because you can't be be doing this for for a long time as well. Now, but here's the problem: when you start being transactional, using one-shot system in a trust system, you lose your reputational capital very fast. Okay, but it's tricky, and the reason it's tricky is this: in the short term, you may look like you're doing great, because as you're doing it, the consequences of that are going to be felt much longer down the road. Okay, because you are losing with every transaction, you're losing trust. So if you're using a one-shot approach in a trust system, you may actually win in the short term, but you're destined to lose long term. Now let's look at if you look at foreign politics, geopolitics, that is like a super trust system because it lasts more than just one generation. It lasts generations. So the relationship between countries, it lasts 50, 100 years into the future. Okay, so if you look about what has happened over the last 3 weeks, we have basically been using transactional system in the trust system. Let me give you a couple examples. Tariffs to Mexico. Tariffs to Canada. It's very clear that the reason the president has those tariffs to Canada because he started an economics war towards Canada because he wants them to be 51st state. There is nothing I said right now that's not told by president. Okay? That's not how exceptional nation behaves. At the same time, when he talked about Greenland, he did not rule out the fact that we may invade Greenland. Let me tell you who else invades other countries. Putin does. Okay, but I'm not saying he's Putin, but I'm saying this is what not exceptional countries like Russia do. Okay, but let me, you may agree or disagree. Like we just talked about NATO. Okay, and by the way, I may actually argue that that NATO has to pay. The European Union has to pay for its own defense. There is nothing wrong with that, but there is a consequence to that. There is a cost to that, and it's there. Is that the trust? There's going to be cost to that as well, and my point is this: it's very likely that little by little we are losing soft power, and that makes us weaker, and therefore we may have stronger military. But as we lose soft power, when other countries look at us, and they basically think, can we trust them? Okay, can we, because right now, what's happening today, when others look at us, they're basically thinking, we can trust American president until midterms or until next presidential election. So we are losing this. So if you are a foreign country and you are thinking about, putting money in, U.S. as a reserve currency, you're going to be thinking twice. So again, I'm really, really, really. Everything I said was not political. That was not, it's a cold analysis. So that's my thinking on what's going to happen to U.S. dollar. So how we position portfolio for this? Today, basically half of our portfolio is in European stocks or defense companies. We also own a lot of, we have exposure to oil and natural gas. When U.S. dollar gets weaker, oil prices usually go up because they're priced in U.S. dollar. So that's a kind of somewhat natural hedge against a soft U.S. dollar. We also so what also happens when you have weaker dollar, everything becomes more expensive. So you have inflation. Now, Warren Buffett said when he was asked a question, what's the best way to hedge against inflation? And he gave different answers at different times, but one answer I really liked. He said, you want to have a claim on somebody else's revenue. Like, what does it mean? I'll give an example. I'll give you a couple examples, and one applies to us, actually. If you own Visa company, right? They just charge a transaction, every time you spend money, they charge 1%. If X costs $10, they charge, $1. If X costs $20, they charge $2. Their costs don't go up as fast. So these kind of companies do well during the inflationary environment. Another business that may do well during that environment is Uber, because I know I see John smiling. Uber, because if your ride costs $40, they're going to make $8, and if your ride costs $80, they're going to make $16. Okay, so because they can have 20% take rate. So we thought a lot. I keep telling you that we don't own the market. And again, our portfolio speaks for itself and how it looks. But this is the thinking goes behind when we pick each individual company. Also, and I'm going to talk about tariffs kind of in generalities. The way tariffs have been implemented to date, it just created a lot of uncertainty. Business people and economy and stock market don't like uncertainty because they don't know what decisions to make. So it's possible that we may, that our White House has, may engineer its own recession just because of the way the tariffs were implemented. So so they, by the way, I get a lot of questions. How are we going to invest if we have a recession? And my answer is nothing's going to change. First of all, recessions come and go. Okay, I mean they're not fun. The stocks may decline, some may not. A lot of our companies are mostly not cyclical companies. Defense companies for sure not cyclical. Some companies we own are counter-cyclical. But if we have a recession, it's not the end of the world. Okay, we'll get through that. The companies we own are either robust or anti-fragile. Robust means they get through recession just fine. Anti-fragile, it means that some of them actually will become stronger and more, and earnings will increase because they have taken market share, the competitors went out of business. So if we have recession, it's not a big deal. Anyway, I think this is basically all I have as a speech. So now we're going to have a Q&A, and I think my daughter Hannah, where's my daughter Hannah? Oh, Mia, okay, my daughter Mia is going to bring you a mic. And my son John is going to bring the mic. So if you have a question, raise your hand. Raise your hand. Right there.
Make it easy on Mia.
There.
Hi, my name's David. I might be your newest client, but I have a question. As I drove many days to get here with other business, I noticed the poor condition of roads, interstate, state highways, bridges that have been closed. The American Society of Civil Engineers have given the U.S., constantly a pretty poor grade on our infrastructure. So do you see investment opportunities in things like aggregates and cement, steel, rebar, et cetera?
So we looked at aggregates companies, and they trade as if they were Google. Like they trade at 27, 30 times earnings. I mean, aggregates business is a very good business because they're kind of a natural monopolies. In other words, the company that had the location is everything, because the cost, the aggregates are so cheap, and they are so heavy. The transportation cost after 10 miles becomes everything. Or 15 miles. So we look like aggregate companies. They're phenomenal businesses in the sense that they are kind of monopolies, from perspective, but they're all very, very expensive, David, and we haven't found any companies that we liked in this, in steel or other businesses. Yeah. Other questions? Ed? John? Oh, look. Okay. Who gets there first? Right.
Hi, I'm Ed. I've been a client for a very long time.
That's right.
You say that you expect that the U.S. dollar is going to decline in price, but it's a zero-sum game. It's a relative valuation. What other major currencies do you expect to go up in price? Why? And what does that imply about the transition from the U.S. as the global reserve currency to another currency as the global reserve, or there will be no currency as global reserve?
Thank you. What's interesting, I spent a lot of time thinking about Europe, and Europe may have an incredible opportunity today to become kind of a more pragmatic place. I'm talking about generalizing when I talk about Europe. And because spending on defense will put a tremendous stress on that economy, on that continent. Let me tell you how broken it is first, okay? So we own a company, Dassault Aviation, that makes fighter jets. Great business. So we were talking to Dassault maybe 2 or 3 months ago. And we asked them, like, so right now they're making 3 planes a month. I said, can you make 4 or 5? They said, we have plenty of capacity. We have plenty of factories, etc. But the problem is this. When we hire employees, we cannot lay them off. I would just want you to think about this. This is such a great economics lesson, because I'm sure a lot of French had a very good intentions, right? They're like, why didn't we protect our employees? Therefore, evil employer cannot lay them off. But by doing that, they actually created higher structural unemployment, right? So I think for Europe, I'm hopeful, and I'm sure Europe is going to disappoint me many times, but that Europe has this unique opportunity to become stronger. So there is a euro. When US dollar was declining, right, as of right now, it was declining against US dollar, against euro and other currencies. But I don't look at it as US dollar declining against a particular currency, against just all currencies. Meaning, we are just a little bit less good, a little bit less strong and reliable than we were before, and so I think it's just going to decline overall in general. I don't have a particular insight into if Brazilian currency will go up, etc. But it just across the whole basket, I would argue. Hope it helps.
How about the reserve currency question? Is there going to be another reserve currency?
So there's going to be another reserve currency. So and that's a huge if Europe becomes a stronger, pragmatic continent, there's absolutely no reason why it can't be. Because it has a lot of things going for it. It's a democracy. It's a very large. It just, so it's $20 trillion, which is very close to us. It's just, the economy is weak, right? And, by the way, it's going to have a stronger militarily. So it's possible that Europe could become, but this is not a projection I'm making, but I'm just saying it is possible that Europe could be an alternative to the United States. But this is not tomorrow. This is, far down the road. Thank you. Other questions? All right, Sarah has to, Mia, Chris right there, right behind you. You're gonna be right there. This way you can be Jonah. Yeah.
Okay. For many reasons, but specifically including the shipping disruption in the Red Sea, many Israeli companies are trading at valuations that some people might find interesting. And I'm wondering, are you looking at any of them where there might be long-term opportunities due to what we hope is a short-term disruption in the Red Sea and the disruption of the logistical chains, that these Israeli companies depend on?
Chris, I just want to clarify, you're talking about shipbuilding or shippers?
Shipping companies and also those dependent on Red Sea shipping for their supply chains and also their exports.
Got it. Thank you, Chris. So I looked at shippers for about 5 minutes, and I realized this is probably one of the worst businesses in the world. Like there's airlines and there's shipbuilders. It's a horrible, horrible business because the earnings could go from, we look at the company that was trading at $10, and a year before the earnings were $20. It looks like a very cheap stock, except they were projected to lose 30. So it's a very, very difficult business. Let me give you an example of how difficult it is. Okay, this is very interesting. When Houthis attacked Red Sea, a lot of companies basically had to start sending their ships out, go around Africa. Okay, so the question is that good or bad for shippers? Well, it's actually very good, Because what happens is that the longer, the longer the ship travels, the less cargo it can, it can carry. Therefore, it removes supply, and the rates went up. So let me give you another example. If this is why it's so difficult. Like it's very difficult to, for that to be a long-term investment. I'll give you another example. If oil prices go up, is that a good for just a container shipper? I'm not talking about oil tankers, but container shipper. You would think, okay, well, they use a lot of oil, so it must be bad for them. No, it's great. Why? Here's why. Because when oil prices go up, they figure out that the faster they go, the more oil they burn. So they actually slow down how fast they go. And therefore, the slower they go, again, removes supply of the market. So therefore, the rates go up. But the point is, this is the arithmetic I have to do when I own the stuff. And you can't really own them for the long term. You have to trade them. So this is not type of investment. But I misunderstood your question in the beginning. And I'm going to answer the question that I misunderstood. So I'm not going to answer the question because you brought something up. You started to talk about Israeli companies. You said something about Israeli companies. And I'm going to talk about, we looked at Israeli defense companies, okay? And I found them, this is like, I was drooling over them because those are absolutely incredible businesses. If you look at US, like US or European defense contractors, those are kind of a monopolies, and most of them have fixed price contracts, which make them good investments for us because that's their stable, their business becomes very, very stable. Israel is a tiny country. They can't afford to have fixed price contracts. Therefore, they actually have to like really work for that money, which makes those companies, like a lot more efficient. Also, Israel is constantly at war. And for that reason, most people who work for those companies actually serve in the military. And they actually have a military experience. So therefore, they're much better at coming up with products that are more relevant. Another reason for this, and this is a very Israeli thing, Israelis are extremely direct. And I think I told this story before, but I love this story. We have an Israeli client. And whenever she calls Cyrus starts shaking a little bit. Israelis are very direct, okay? So there is no, hi, how are you? They just get to the point, okay? And she sends me, one time I get an email from her, and she says, Vitaliy, this stock, you should add more to this stock, I don't like the dividend, should do this stock, you should do this. She gives me like 15 points I have to do. And I replied to her in like very, very direct. I wrote this and I said, if you'd like to manage, if you want me to manage my money, I don't think you need me because you seem to be doing a great job. Then I took this and I put it in ChatGPT and I said, make it nice, make it so it sounds like very American. And so what was the one paragraph became like half a page. And it's like, I hope the sun is shining, I hope you're doing great, and all these things. And I said it became very buttery and stuff. And I said, here's the two versions, choose the one you like. Here's the Israeli version, here's the American. And she laughed and she said, I like the Israeli version better. But there is a point I want to make. This directness means you get instant feedback. It means that, I'll give you another example. It took Israel 4 years to come up with, to create Iron Dome from start to finish. It takes Lockheed Martin 15 years to create a missile. 15 years. Let me explain what happens. On the year 7, they realized that most of the microchips or component of memory are now obsolete, and that now they have to start doing over again. Because, you know why? Because we are very wealthy nations. We have no constraints. Okay, Israel, it's a wealthy nation, but this, because it's small, the size of the defense budget is much smaller. Therefore, I'll give another example. When first Gulf War, American government spent some ungodly amount of money on drones. And And then they ended up using Israeli drones that will cost a tiny fraction of that, of what Lockheed or whoever, spent on their drones. So this, this scarcity, these constraints, actually, been extremely beneficial to Israel. So we looked at a company called Elbit, which is one of the largest public Israeli companies, and we thought it was absolutely incredible. It's very, very, when we looked at it, it was very, very expensive, and then it doubled. So we did not buy them. But anyway, so I'm answering the question that I thought you were asking, but you didn't. But I figured I'd share this with you. Other questions? Right there, Mia. No? Oh, there's John right there. Okay.
Hi, Vitaliy. Gary. I've got 2 comments and 2 questions. The first comment is that Europe, this is tongue-in-cheek, but I think it's going to be transient incontinent. The second is, thank you so much for investing in Rheinmetall, and thank you to Cyrus for keeping me in it when I called him up and said, Cyrus, it's gone up a lot, shouldn't we sell? And he said, no, we think it's got more ways to go, and it does. Okay, first question is, do you think there's a possibility that all of this action that Trump is doing, that possibly he would like to see the economy pull back so that interest rates drop, because we have $6 to $8 trillion in the next 2 years that we have to refinance. And if the economy pulls back, the Fed will probably drop interest rates, and that will lower the amount of money that we're going to have to pay for the national debt. The second question I have is, we hope that you last longer than Warren Buffett, but if you don't, is there a succession plan for IMA?
Jerry, thank you so much. First question. So I wrote a tweet that basically, my son is smiling because he read it, that basically, but I was very sarcastic about it, that basically described what you just said. He's going to tank the economy, interest rates decline, we refinance, our debt, etc. Well, I was very facetious, and I don't, even if this is what he's doing, intentionally, which I don't think he is, it may not work out that way. Let me explain you why. So let's say we go into recession, and in the past, interest rates would decline. The Federal Reserve will lower the interest rates would decline. However, when we say the word interest rates, that actually is a little bit misleading, because we have different interest rates. We have short-term rates and we have long-term rates. Federal Reserve only controls short-term rates. Okay, they can lower short-term rates. The problem is the bond market, unless they start buying long-term bonds, it's the bond market that sets long-term rates. Okay, and this is, so I would argue today, if we go into recession, some interest rates may actually go up, which hasn't happened in the past. And the reason they may go up, because this time around we have $36 trillion of debt. And when we have $36 trillion of debt and our economy declines, tax revenues decline, and we are already, in the great economy today, we are running 6 or 7% budget deficits. If we are running 8 or 9, then if I was a bond investor, I would say, do I really want to commit at this interest rates for the next 10 or 20 or 30 years? And I'm probably going to demand higher coupon. So I think that even if Trump was that Machiavellian, it could backfire. So that's it. First question. Second question. So my succession plan for now is my good diet and exercising. Okay, which doesn't give you a lot of comfort, except here's how I look at it. At some point, we're going to have a succession plan. Okay, but in the worst case, something were to happen to me tomorrow, your money is sitting at the reputable firms like Schwab or Fidelity. They're all in liquid securities that could be liquidated with a phone call. If something were to happen to me, then you could have somebody else take over. At some point, as I find, either we're going to build a team, to create succession, I have to have a team that basically can replicate what we do, and it takes time. So at some point we'll have a succession, but I work out twice a week. I really do. I walk every day, for 1 hour every day in the park, religiously. I eat very little carbs when I'm in Denver. I eat very healthy overall. So, by the way, it's a true story. Every week, we go to Whole Foods on Monday, and we get wholly foods. We get like vegetables, protein, no carbs, and this is our diet for the whole office. For the, no processed food allowed. So anyway, I know this is my answer to your question. At some point, I'm going to have a succession, but I hope, like Warren Buffett, I can do this until I'm 94. But let me just answer it also differently this way. I wouldn't want to do anything else. I truly, I spend basically 70% of my time doing research, 20% of my time writing, and 10% of doing everything else, running the firm, all these other things. And that's the balance I want to have. If I can, I'll be doing it for a very long time. Statistically, I should be able to. That's my answer. But great question. And by the way, Jerry was one of our early clients, and I told him, this is a very true story. He gave us a huge amount of his net worth, and he's retired, he's a retired doctor. And whenever I make investment decisions, I think of him. Honestly, this is because I can see a face right here, and because that's the gravity of decisions we make. Because I know this is it. He's retired. He's not going to make any more money, and therefore, every decision we make, I want to make sure that we do a good job. It doesn't work out every time, and sometimes you remind me of that, and that's okay. But on a whole, that's the amount of responsibility. That's when I think of you when we make those decisions. Anyway, thank you very much for that. Other questions?
It's on? All right, perfect. Hey, Vitaliy, Graham. Quick question. You mentioned the tariffs earlier, and you talked specifically about Canada and kind of what the administration's end game is, essentially, with the tariffs. But obviously, there's tariffs against a lot of other countries as well. And Trump has made, relatively clear that one of his overall goals with this is to try and bring more manufacturing base back to the United States. Do you foresee any opportunities or risks with that, or do you think it's all kind of like a pipe dream for, to kind of get the votes in that particular regard?
Graham, thank you so much for this. I think tariffs are a good answer for some things, but not everything. And I think that's a very important distinction. Like, I would argue that reciprocal tariffs are very fair. And by the way, reciprocal tariffs consume very little reputational capital because everybody realizes that's fair. If you bring a car to Europe and they charge you 10%, they put 10% tariff on this, and you only charge 2% tariff when they bring the car to the United States, well, that doesn't sound fair to me. So reciprocal tariffs to me kind of make sense. I can also see tariffs for some protected industries that are strategically important for us, like steel, right? Because if you need to build ships, which is strategic for us, you need steel. Now, the problem with tariffs in general, and I'm going to stop on this point, is that they actually bring in a huge amount of corruption. The reason for that is just very simple, because now if you are a tariff king, right, that's what basically White House becomes, then you can, somebody comes to you and says, can you please reduce tariff on this or raise tariffs on this? And suddenly people owe you favors. So there is a possibility for corruption. Now, onshoring, and that's what you're talking about, what's going to happen with or without them anyway. because our country is, like today, if you're an American company and you're building a plant in China, you're taking a huge risk. Because here's what happens. When you sell stuff in China, you can't basically bring currency back. It's very difficult. So it kind of gets trapped there. So I think onshoring was going to happen anyway. A lot of it was going to happen anyway after the pandemic. Recognizing that some industries are vital and have to be here, to me it makes sense. Let me give you one example. When the pandemic happened, we discovered that active ingredients that go into drugs, like pharmaceuticals, all of them, most of them are made either in China or in India, most of them in China. So if China decided not to provide us those ingredients, our pharmacies would be empty. Just this kind of things. This is strategic for us, right? So so as a response to that, we made investments in Mexico, because Mexico is, until a while, a couple months ago, it was our friend. So we own the Bolsa, which is Mexican stock exchange. And our idea was, as Mexican economy goes up, it's you have more companies listed, and we bought exchange very, very cheap. It paid us 6% dividend. So it's that's our thinking. So we're still looking at investments in Mexico. Because I think onshoring is going to continue, and after this trade war with Mexico is going to be over, and it will be, I think, in the meantime, there will be opportunities. In fact, I have a show and tell. Yes, some of you may wake up tomorrow and find out we bought a new stock, which is in Mexico, and that company, I told you I have show and tell, makes these products. It makes Jose Cuervo tequila, and it makes 1800. And that's a company called Beckley. And we just literally were buying it the last couple of days. We bought a tiny position. But actually, it's a true story. We had a new client, maybe if you're in the room, please tell us this, who looked at his, when his account was traded, he said, so basically you own guns, tobacco, and oil. Well, now we also own booze, but basically that kind of describes our portfolio a little bit. But the reason, it's a Mexican tequila company. It's the largest tequila company in the world, and what we liked about it, if you have inflation, if you think about spirits in general, they have pricing power, because if you like 1800 and there is inflation, you'll be paying whatever they charge you. Back to your question, Graham. We are looking to find opportunities in onshoring, or either, and when we see them, we're looking at Mexico actively right now for opportunities in general. Yeah. All right. Other questions? Stan. All right.
Hello. I think my relationship with IMA precedes Vitaliy by a good decade or two. I originally brought clients to IMA when they first opened their doors. I think it was 1981, with Mike Kahn and Merv Perry. Number one, the reason that I continue to have trust in this company is because of the honesty that you get with every answer. I have worked with some of the largest money managers in the country. And I can tell you that when I pick up the phone, I can get somebody at IMA that's going to answer my question very quickly. I'm not a paid shill. He's taken a lot of crap from me over the years. My question, now that I've done the introduction, you've talked about buying stocks. Mm-hmm. Can you please address how you make a decision to sell stocks? Because sometimes you and I go a little back and forth on letting something go too far. And specifically, I would appreciate some edification on QVC, because I know when I look at the stock, it looks like it's down, but there have been huge dividends paid over the years that I was not aware of because I wasn't involved at the time. So I'll leave you with that.
Thank you, Stan. Stan, I've known Stan for literally 27 years. Stan and I disagree a lot often, but I still love him and respect him. So, okay. So there is an important transformation has happened to me as an investor, and I would argue it probably happened, accelerated a little bit over the last couple of years. And that is impatience when I own companies that are in a structurally broken industry. In fact, I'm going to go a step further. I basically made a decision not to buy companies in structurally broken industries. When I realized that the company is in a structurally broken industry, sometimes you don't know this when you go into it. We try to get out of it, as soon as we can. So I would argue that some of my most recent mistakes, and were owning the companies that was a cigar butt, and I thought maybe there's a lot more puffs in it than the market did, and the market ended up being right. But so it doesn't mean that every time I buy stock and it declines, I'm going to sell it. That's not what I mean. I'm just saying when we do research and I realize there is a structural change in the industry that I didn't anticipate, or something has changed which was not our original assumptions, a lot of times we sell the stock. Recently we sold Melrose, which I'm sure some of you are going to ask me about this, and our analysis was wrong. When we analyzed the company, our analysis were mostly right, except the management, when they communicate to us what the earnings power of the company is, they were honest about the earnings, but what did not say that the cash flow is going to be very different. And I'll give you an example. So this is, I forget, the $10 billion market cap company, which was going to have $1 billion of earnings, but their free cash flow were going to be only $100 million. And when we discovered that, we sold the stock. Luckily, we paid, we bought it cheap enough that it was, actually we made money on this. But this is where the facts change. My assumptions were wrong, and we sold the stock. There was QVC is I would argue, don't believe your statement for some clients, not others. Because what happened when we bought QVC, they paid us I forget how much now, $8 or $9 of dividends. So if I forget how much, let's say we paid $10, they paid us $8 or $9 of dividends. So the stock today trades at 30 cents. So the loss is not 99% or whatever that is, but more like 5 or 10%. Okay, that's number one. For new clients, where we own QVC, this is how we look at it. It's a very simple math. It's a stock that trades at 50 cents right now, or whatever that is. And 3 years ago, they made $2 of earnings. They're trying to turn around the company. If they succeed, then it's going to be worth $20 or $30 or $10. So you have 20 or 30 or 40x upside. If they don't succeed, and they may not, and I don't know this, then you're going to lose all your money. The thing is, it's such a tiny position, then what's 20, 30 basis points position that I spent almost no time thinking about it. Because we made this incredibly asymmetric bet, and that's basically how I look at it. I would not want to have a portfolio of QVCs, and we don't have a portfolio of QVCs. So we have a few of those companies, one company basically, and that's a tiny, tiny position. So that's basically how I look at it. But selling right is very difficult, and I am trying to become a little less patient with myself in a sense. Again, if thesis changes, I try to sell. But sometimes there is an opportunity to buy as well, by the way. So yeah. Other questions? Oh, right there, Chris.
Since the name of QVC came up, do you look at or follow or integrate thoughts about any of the Liberty Media debt with regard to our QVC possession?
So the question is if so not really. So the amount of mental real estate I want the QVC to take is almost nothing, and it doesn't, and it, I wanted to take as much as 20 basis points position deserves. Okay, so that's number one. So we own Liberty, we own Charter through Liberty. So for those of you who don't know, there's Charter Communications, and there was another company, Liberty Broadband, that owned 25% of that. And when we looked at it, we realized we can buy Charter at, it's literally just, you have Charter Communications, which is a cable company, and you have another company that owns 25% of its shares. That's it. And it has a small telecom business in Alaska. But it's most of the value is just in the publicly listed shares of Charter. That's it. So when we were buying Liberty Broadband, we are literally buying it at 35% discount to Charter shares. So, and now Charter announced a deal that they're going to buy back. They're going to buy Liberty, and we suddenly realized most of that appreciation. And it's Liberty will go away in 2 or 3 years, and it's going to just become Charter stock. So that's what and it's a significant position for us. But buying Liberty, kind of Liberty debt, whatever, that kind of stuff. That's not what we do. I'm looking for easy problems. Not this is too complicated. Other questions? Yes, Evan. One second. John will give you a microphone.
2 questions. To follow up on the succession, how old are you?
51, almost going to 52.
You're a young fella. Number 2, you own, like you said, oil and pipelines to carry oil.
Mm-hmm.
But have you looked at alternative energies, or is that a structurally broken industry?
I have not found an alternative energy company that made economical sense. So there may be a time when it's going to be the case, but as of right now, I don't know one. So
Is that because of too much government participation?
So if you remove government subsidies, a lot of them would not exist. So when you buy these companies, you have to have an opinion of what the government is going to do, and I don't have an insight into this. Trump may wake up tomorrow and decide, whoever, it doesn't actually, whoever's in the White House, it doesn't matter. May decide they embrace him or not embrace him. So I really have no idea on this. So it's if I saw one that made economical sense, we'll look at it, and if it's undervalued and high quality business, we would buy it. But as of right now, I don't have a single one that we looked and said it makes sense. Other questions? Right there. Hannah? Is it on?
So forgive me, I'm just the spouse of a client.
Oh, no,
but I'm interested.
Spouses matter.
Interested, you just recently said that you hired somebody recently to help with AI.
Yeah.
Of course, we're all bombarded by this, but interested to hear what you think it can add to your company and how you'd like to integrate it.
Well, thank you for this question. I got to answer it in a way that we don't give away all our trading secrets, just because we are spending a lot of energy on this. But let me tell you let me just try to be a little bit more general first. So the way I look at AI, first of all, I realized that I have to be a lot more humble when I talk about it, because whatever I thought 6 months ago, I don't think this anymore, because it seems like things change so fast. And let me give you this example. Today, we use AI as another analyst. Let me explain what I mean. So when you program in AI, so what does it mean? We basically, most of the programming happens by whoever trains the models, right? But when you use AI, you actually program it as well, so by writing prompts. Those prompts are actually the programming. So we spend a lot of time on creating prompts for our research. So I'll give you a true story. So we own, as I mentioned, we own Charter Communication, we own a little bit of Comcast. So I was talking to a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, and we were talking about Charter, and he said, you know what, one problem I have is that I don't know the impact that Starlink is going to have on its business. And my friend said, you know, we talked to probably 5 different experts, and we could not get a good answer. I said, give me an hour. I went on ChatGPT, deep research, and I basically said, I gave it context. I said, we are value investors, we analyze this company, we own it. What impact would Starlink have on Charter and Comcast? And I asked, only use reputable data. And we had other prompts there. And you hit start, it maybe came up and asked me a few other questions. Do you want it to look at rural areas, urban areas, this kind of stuff. Anyway, 10 minutes later, I have a 30-page report, which uses data that comes from Starlink, from FCC, and other, that basically, like literally, after I reached the 30-page report, I became an expert on how satellites work, about bandwidth, and all these different things. So it's an incredible research tool. That's number one. Number two, I would argue that if I owned Google stock, I would be scared. And let me tell you why. I found myself that the last 2 months, I've been doing a lot more searches on AI than I've been using on Google. Now, Google has, Google is a brilliant company, and they're going to have their own AI. They have their own AI, and it's very good. Except, suddenly they have competition they didn't have before. So in the past, when you wanted to search, you Googled. Now you have I go on my phone and ask ChatGPT and look for, get the answer. And now, in fact, I'm a lot less satisfied and a lot more impatient with the answers I get on Google, because I got used to. So this is very important to understand. When you look at something on Google, most of us don't go past page 1. And when we go to a particular page, when we go, one page deeper, we click on a few pages and, et cetera. When you use AI, like this, ChatGPT in our case a lot of times, it basically goes 50 pages wide and 50 pages deep. And therefore, now it could hallucinate, it gives you wrong answers, et cetera. You can check that. And that's going to get better. But I think the quality of information saves us a huge amount of time. Okay, I'm giving you kind of general answers, but let me put it the way, how we apply in our research deeply. It helps us. Let me answer it this way. In my business, value investors, what they do, they usually run quantitative screens. What it means is show me companies that have a size of, let's say, $1 billion or more, that has a price to earnings of 15 or less, or have return on equity. We have databases for this. We do this all the time, right? And then you get a list of 50 companies, and you start looking through them. What ChatGPT allows us to do is to do qualitative searches. What I gave you an example was a quantitative search. What we're doing, and I'm gonna be very superficial about it to tell you, because I don't want to go very deep into it. We are basically using ChatGPT to look for qualitative information when we do searches. And that becomes very, very important. So, this is so new that I have no idea where, this is what we're doing right now. Three weeks from now, we'll be doing something else. But we have on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 a.m., I have a call with my analyst and our AI guy, Cameron. And my analyst, spends a lot more time talking to Cameron, trying different things. So we take it, we take AI very seriously because, if we don't, other people will, and we'll be at competitive disadvantage. So that's my, no problem. Other questions? Yeah, right there, John.
So last year, you, well, for me anyway, you started the concept of shorting some stocks. Well, you asked for permission if we would be willing to consider shorting S&P 500. And my question is, it didn't seem to work that well, but was it because it was too early for S&P 500, or is that something you're not really considering moving forward?
All right, thank you. Let me clarify what you said because you're almost right, but not 100% right.
Okay.
Okay. So I never shorted a stock in my life.
Not individual stock.
No, I never shorted an index in my life. However, let me clarify. Okay. What we did, we bought a put.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
That's a very important distinction.
Okay.
We bought a put on S&P 500, out of the money put. So the reason it's important because when you buy a put, which is basically a financial option where you bet on it, that it will decline, the risk profile is very different. The most we can lose is how much we paid for that put. It's that we basically, in other words, we bought an insurance. If, we basically, what we did, we just bought an insurance, and the most you can lose when you buy an insurance is the premium for insurance. That's how I look at it. So this is an important distinction.
Okay.
So we have a very mixed experience with options. For some options, sometimes it works out brilliantly. We bought colors on Uber, where we basically give up, we gave up upside, and for that upside we got paid, and we used that money to buy a put, and that worked out brilliantly, because we actually ended up making money on this transaction. It was beautiful. The problem is options. You just, like when you buy insurance in general, you don't know if the house doesn't burn down, and you bought insurance. Was it the wrong decision, to do this? And when it came to our puts, we probably maybe bought it, a few months too early, or this kind of thing. We'll do it from time to time, but a couple things have to happen. Those puts have to be cheap. What I mean by this, when you buy, okay, I'll give an example. If you buy an insurance after hurricane, if you try to buy fire insurance today in Los Angeles, it's going to be difficult, and it's going to be very expensive, right? So that insurance is expensive today. Maybe 5 years from now it will be cheaper because it's going to fade away from people's memory. Then insurance will be cheaper. Kind of the same thing happens in the stock market. When people are very excited about stocks and they think they can only go up, this insurance puts get very cheap, and then actually become attractive, and that's when we buy it. Again, when we do this, we buy a tiny position, like I think 30, 50 basis points positions. There will be a time when they work out and we look brilliant, and we'll forget that all the times we lost money in the past, buying them. But the only point that what I'm trying to say is that there is a time to do this at some points in time. We're never going to commit a lot of capital to them, and that's how we look at these transactions. Did it help?
Yeah. So for the moment, it's sort of out of favor as far as you're concerned, but it could return if conditions change.
So I'll give you an example. Like I was literally looking to buy puts 3 weeks ago, and then 2 days later it was too late. So, I could, so it's a. when conditions are right, we'll do it. Yeah, we'll do it again.
Okay.
Right?
I have another comment, unless
No,
somebody
please,
else has a question.
Please do. Yes, please do. Yes.
So you're talking about AI, which is why it came to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then you made a sort of a joke earlier about quantum computing.
Yeah.
From your perspective, is it too early to get involved, or are you looking at it, or are you just waiting for Meta or Google or whomever to be the guy that makes it happen? Or are you looking at any of those smaller companies that are in the mix?
Well, first of all, we're already involved, right there. Quantum
Right,
computer.
we've got the human version.
Yeah, we have right there. We have quantum computer sitting right there. Listen, it's right now. It's so speculative. Like what I know. So there is a quantum computer company. I forget the name of it, and it trades at insane valuation. And I forget, how do I know if what they have is going to work or not? So I have very little insight in this case. So
I get it. I got the answer.
yeah.
Okay.
Other questions? Chris. All right, John, Hannah.
Okay, I know as a registered investment advisor you can't short stocks, but
Yeah.
why have you never shorted a stock outside of IMA? And do you have a philosophical, sort of view as to that's not something you want to do?
Oh, absolutely. No, thank you. That's a great question. So the question is why I never shorted stock in my life. The answer is very simple. I have a few good friends who are short sellers. And these people almost have a different DNA makeup from anybody in this room. Their tolerance for pain is very different. And because when I buy a stock, the most I can lose is 100%. I mean, it's a lot, okay? But it's, the most I can lose is 100%. And I also, when I buy a stock and it declines, it becomes a smaller percent of the portfolio. When you short, you have unlimited downside, right? Now, Jim Chanis, who is a friend of mine, who's always rebuts this. He says I've seen a lot more stocks go to zero than go to infinity. And he's mathematically right, except when you own a stock, when you short a stock and it quadruples, it might as well be infinity, in my mind. And also what happens when when you short a stock and it goes up, now it's a huge part of your portfolio, huge. So I'm already losing my hair, let's be honest. And I would have a lot less hair if I shorted stocks. Also, I really kind of I'm looking for easy things. This is not easy. And this is very, very, it could get very, very painful very, very fast. And it could be a way to blow up portfolio. So I'll give you an example. Like if you bought it AMC or GameStop, I mean, if you shorted AMC, it would have been the right decision to make, except you had 3 years of incredible pain, and then you made 80%. I would argue sometimes the headache that comes with that is just not worth it. That's, other questions? That's it? Is that, oh, no? All right. All right, well, thank you very much. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you. And I appreciate that some of you drove from California, some of you drove from North Dakota. There are some books out there. Grab a copy of which one of them. There's some Enstrom candies for you there. Grab them too. And I just really want to thank you for coming. I really want to thank you for the trust that you have in IMA. And we're going to try to work very, very hard for you. And can't promise you anything, but we can only promise that we're going to work hard. And yeah, we appreciate you. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you know someone who'd enjoy this episode, share it with them. To listen to more episodes, visit investor.fm. Enjoy life and prosper.